Good day. Welcome to SOAP 304. Study Session 1. Social Policy. Introduction. In this study session, we will explore social policy. We will also highlight its effect on social services, learning outcomes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to 1. Define and use correctly the terms in bold: policy, rules, social policy. 2. Discuss expectations of social services providers. 3. Outline the history of social policy. Meaning of policy. Policy, in its simplest description, can be referred to as a set of rules. Our lives and those of social work clients are governed by rules. Rules about services available, rules about how to drive cars, rules about when to resume duty and when to quit duty, etc. Social policy may be defined as policy activities which influence welfare. Social policy is generically used to define the role of the state in relation to the welfare of its citizens. There is a relationship between government and the economy. The extent to which social policy should be seen as dependent upon or even a derivative of economic policy. These implications for social policy are as follows. 1. That the main determinants of welfare are economic. 2. That the government's role in diverting resources into social policies must be seen to be closely played in the management of the economy. 3. That social policies will be determined by views about the way the economy does or should operate. Specific social policies need to be understood in terms of their relationships to economic policies. Social and economic conditions create the need for social policies. It is like a chicken and egg issue. Social policy cannot be analyzed alone without reference to other activities of the state. Policies are usually products of politics and other policies. The study of social policy hives off a specific area of social activity. Policies tell us which actions among a multitude of actions we may and may not take. It guides our work and our decisions. Social policies tell us what resources are available to our clients and what we can do for them. There are 3 peculiarities to the definition of social policy. 1. That the policies that are identified as social should not be interpreted as if they were conceived and implemented with only the welfare of the public in mind. 2. That other policies not conventionally identified as social policies may make a comparable or even greater contribution to welfare. 3. That public policy should be seen as a whole in which social policies are significantly interlinked with other policies. To understand social policy, some questions such as the following need to be answered. 1. What is the system of social security? 2. What benefits does the health service provide? 3. What are the government doing about pension scheme? 4. What is the position of administration about employment situation? The study of social policy is concerned with examining the extent to which the state meets people's needs and to which it contributes to social equality. Social policy is seen as concerned with the alleviation of social ills. Social welfare policy includes the laws and regulations that govern which social programs exist, what categories of clients are served, and who qualifies for a given program. It also sets standards regarding the type of services to be provided and qualifications of the service provider. Social welfare policy involves decisions of various levels of the government, especially the federal government as expressed in budgetary expenditures, appropriations, and approved programs. Two, expectations from social services providers. The major expectation from social services providers is to improve social justice, fairness, and equality towards well-being for the overwhelming majority of citizens. Generally, social policy has effects on 1. Employment. Issues such as family members who can work are determined by policy. For instance, a minor under age may not be engaged in employment to avoid being entangled in Child Rights Act contravention. 2. Provision of income. Social policy determines how income is provided or not provided to designate groups of people, and how much money is provided to a family without resources. What do you do if policies neglect clients who are slowly starving to death? 3. Health. Social policy determines the health programs for the people, the citizens. What do you do for clients excluded by the systems? 4. Homeless people. Policies provide clients with temporary shelter, food, and longer-term housing. What do you as a social worker do if there are no such policies and families live on the streets? 5. Daycare. Most women work. Most women with children work, but social policy provides for a controlled hour of work for nursing mothers, adequate daycare for their children. What policy changes might help? 6. Child support maintenance. Policies dictate how much support divorced fathers provide their children. Minimum wages are also determined by policies. 3. Historical view of social policy. The political, social, and economic upheavals which marked the second half of the 18th century brought with it increasing scrutiny and criticism of existing institutions. The revolt of the American colonies shattered the old colonial system and heralded the downfall of mercantilist economics. There was dissatisfaction about the way original Elizabethan Poor Law of 1601 was being administered. This was particularly directed at the treatment of the able-bodied unemployed poor who the Act of 1601 had required to be set on work. The critics argued that the Act ought to be more strictly interpreted with regard to this class, and increasing favor was shown to the idea of institutional relief for them. These sets or classes were proposed to be maintained and employed in spinning, weaving, or other simple manufacturing processes. The produce of their labor could be sold to offset cost of their relief. Also, the prospect of being set on regular work in a disciplined institution would deter the idle and reckless from seeking relief, thus further reducing the burden of the poor rate. This development in social history led to a more systematic, analytical approach to social planning to produce social policies that would be more functional in the contemporary problems within the society. New development in policy formulation. The managers in charge of relief were being accused of embezzlement of ratepayers' money and of making lives more difficult and miserable. The workhouses were portrayed as abodes of corruption for the young and of wretchedness for the sick and aged. Opinion was swinging round towards a policy of giving outdoor relief, particularly to those thrown out of work in periods of depression, or those whose earnings were inadequate for their support at the time of rising food prices. There were criticisms and counter-criticisms which eventually led to informed social planning and social policies. Social policy has emerged from social history and social planning, is therefore targeted at poverty reduction, well-being of individual and a progressive society. Economic insecurity in a money economy arises in considerable part when earnings stoop because of unemployment, retirement in old age, death of the family breadwinner, or disability, either short-term or long-term. This calls for social insurance policy. This is a specialized policy. Every social policy is expected to impart positive change on the society. Therefore, we must constantly adapt to changes brought by social policies. These are informed derivations from social history utilized by the social planners. It is necessary to state that on every new social policy, every new truth which has ever been propounded had for a time caused mischief. It has produced discomfort and oftentimes unhappiness, sometimes disturbing social and religious arrangements, and sometimes merely by the disruption of old and cherished associations of thoughts. If the truth is very new, the harm is serious. In other words, in planning, social policies emerge. The new policies come with some pains to some people, but in the long run, they benefit the larger society. Study session summary. In this study session, we presented that social policy is particularly concerned with social services and welfare state. We defined policy as the structure that gives form to an undertaking. We noted that social history has a long-standing relationship with social planning and social policy. End of study session 1. Thank you for listening.